So let's move on. So first, why merger and acquisition? So merger and acquisition is an inevitable part of CEO's toolkit. Deal making skills are considered very critical. As a CEO, you want your company to grow, and there are two options. One is called organic growth, where you grow in size gradually by applying efficient processes. And second is called inorganic growth, where you acquire somebody and grow inorganically. Whenever you are going for any merger and acquisition, the most important skill required is the deal making. So deal making involves identifying the right target for merger and acquisition, negotiating the deals, identifying the right valuation, pushing through the entire deals, post deal also going for an integration and creating value. Not all companies generally have that kind of capabilities, or not all CEOs have that kind of capabilities. So deal making skill is very important skill, which is considered as a toolkit for a CEO. Second, it's a next engine for growth in maturing industry. In a mature industry, you don't have a scope of organic growth. You have reached to a particular level, and then there is a difficulty for you to grow. So in those kind of industry, it's very important that you go for a merger and acquisition to sustain or improve the growth. The third, it is a must for companies seeking international forays and global presence. Getting into a foreign country through a legal route is challenging because you need to fulfill the legal requirement, the requirement by the stock exchange, the requirement by the law. But acquiring generally is an easier route compared to direct entry, right? And if your vision is to expand yourself on a global footprint, the only way is to go for a tool called merger and acquisition. Next is merger and acquisition also increasingly sought out to weed out the industry cost efficiencies and to capture the cost synergies. So if there is a difference in the cost of two industries, if they merge, the cost synergies could be exploited, right? So these are some of the reasons why do you need mergers and acquisition. Now I'll ask you a very interesting question before I move. I want you to guess a number. You know how many deals in merger and acquisitions are successful? So the question is, if there are 100 deals in a particular year, you know how many of them are actually successful? Now, actually successful means the merger and acquisition ultimately created value, and they were able to identify and exploit the synergy, and it was beneficial for both the companies. What percentage of mergers and acquisition deal do you think, according to you, are successful? So you have to give me a number in the chat box. So Akshit is saying 50-60. Okay, anybody else? So he's saying 50 or 60% of the deals are very good, because since they have evaluated everything, they have done their due diligence, obviously it will be a higher number. Urvi is saying 35. So close to 35% deals. So she's saying roughly 65% of the deals are actually not done properly. Any other numbers, please? If anybody may participate, this is just a random number, 70 to 90. So Dharmesh is very optimistic that all managers are very great and generally they do all things right. So close to 70 or 90. Akshay Kumar is 15 to 20% success. So obviously this is a very low number, but unfortunately what Akshay is saying is close to the right answer. So even though mergers and acquisitions are done significantly, there is an evidence that only close to 20 to 25% of all mergers and acquisition actually succeeded in creating value for the acquirer. Means if you're doing 100% mergers and acquisition, out of which only 25% of the time it is actually successful and it creates value to the acquirer. Means massive value destruction in the acquirer is almost presumed virtually in all cases. So before you go for any acquisition, it is generally assumed that there is a 75% chance of failure, only 25% chance of success. Majority of the cases when the mergers and acquisition deals are happening, only 20 to 25% deals are actually creating value for the shareholders. Investors are hugely skeptical for most of the acquirers, Negative announcement effect on the stock prices, the onus to prove otherwise. Okay, I'll just ask you a very interesting question. Uh, it's a very basic question, nothing technical. When there is a news about a company, what is the relationship between a news of a company and a stock price of a company? So I want you to answer this question. If there is a positive news announcement from a company, let's say that company has got a foreign order, or a company has expanded its sales, or company is getting a new CEO, let's assume that these all are positive news. What is the stock reaction to a positive news for a company normally? What do you think? So Dharmesh is saying that it will increase price, direct relationship between news and stocks. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Now, if I am a acquirer, so I announce that I am an acquirer and I'm acquiring a company. Is that a positive news? So I go to my shareholders and tell that I'm company A, we are in the business and now we are acquiring some more company. Is that a good news or a bad news? Is that a positive news or a negative news? When you acquire some company, what kind of news is this? Is that a negative news? You as a company is acquiring some other company for your shareholder and for you. Is that a good news or a bad news? Good. Okay. So Urvi is only able to answer. What about others? Negative for shareholders? No, it's not. Not. See, I think you're not understanding the. I'm not asking. I'm asking that if a company is acquiring other company, is that a good news in general? So yes, it is a good news, right? If it is a good news, how should the stock market react to a good news? No, no, I'm asking about acquirers company. Urvis, if you are an acquirer and you are announcing that your company is acquiring some other company, what kind of news is that for you and for your shareholders? It's a good news, right? And it should be rewarded, right? Normally, what is the scenario? I'll tell you. Normally, when a company, acquirer company, announces that they are planning to acquire a target company, generally the reaction of stock market is negative. So instead of stock prices going up, generally the stock price of an acquired company falls. What could be the reason? Now I think Dharmesh and Akshay, you have to apply the logic of your answer. In my point of view, it is bad because of low liquidity. Could be. See, it's a very simple thing. When a company is going for a positive news, when they are acquiring, the only response should be positive. If markets are giving you negative response, it may be because markets think that this decision is not correct, this merger and acquisition will not be successful. There may be changes in the company which may be negative or positive for the shareholders. Yes, that is also correct. But mostly what happens when a company announces the acquisition, normally the price of acquired stock falls and the price of target company share increases. Right? So the fundamental reason is normally there is a tendency, there is a research done that whenever you actually announce an acquisition, markets generally don't react positively because they are skeptical or they are doubtful about your ability to acquire and create value in future. So that is the precise reason that in most of the cases, the sentiment or reaction of market is negative. Not always, but in majority of the cases. So investors are hugely skeptical for most of the acquires. Negative announcement affect the stock prices. Yet the because despite of all these problems, yet the merger acquisition deals grows every year, right? Every CEO feels like that he has to do it, right? And some companies have actually built inevitable track record of merger and acquisition led value. For example, Piramal. So Piramal is basically a company which has created substantial value to its shareholder through mergers and acquisitions. So despite of negative indicators, despite of only 25% of the deals becoming successful despite of negative reaction of a positive news. Still most of the companies sought for mergers and acquisition. The reason, every CEO feels like that it has to be done through him, and some of the companies are doing it good and some of the companies are doing it bad. So the question is, if your CEO does not have capability, you should avoid it. And if your CEO has a capability for mergers and acquisition and creating value, you should go ahead with it. Now, obviously, restructuring transactions can be classified into two: expansion and contraction. So, one is business combination transactions, where you are likely to increase the size of the organization. And second is a breakup transaction, where you are likely to decrease the size of the organization. Now, let's just try and understand what is the acquisition look like, because there is a very thin line between mergers and acquisition in terms of definition. But acquisition of a company or shareholding 100% is very common in most of the countries. So when you acquire, it is generally assumed that you are going to acquire the 100%. However, you can make an acquisition for less than 100% also. For example, the second choice available is partial legal majority, which is 50% plus, so 51%. So Vedanta's acquisition of Kane Energy India, Tech Mahindra's acquisition of Satyam post the Ramlingam Raju scandal, Daiichi Sankyo's acquisition of Ranbaxy, and Vodafone's acquisition of Hutch SIR was partial. So partial legal majority means you are not acquiring the company fully, but you are acquiring the majority of the shareholders. Substantial 20 or 30, no majority. Now this is a unique way where actually you are not acquiring the full control, neither you are acquiring the major control. You have a minor control, but you ensure that nobody has a higher control than you. So even though you don't have 51%, you can greatly influence because nobody has more than your share. So substantial means with the 20 and 30% of the share, even without no majority, you can still control the functioning of the target company. So this is a traditional Indian approach which is frequently used. Now it is increasingly infeasible because other factors will get into a problem. This is called a de facto control. So de jure and de facto. De jure is a legal control which requires you to hold more than 50%, and de facto is less than 50%, yet you are able to control because you are a majority of the shareholder. So ACC by Ambuja with only 15%, even less than 15%, ACC was acquired by Ambuja and still they could influence the decision making. Ambuja by Holcom was also the same deal. Acquired companies sometimes retain legal entity. If you are not 100% acquired, if you are going for less than 100%, all acquired companies will retain their separate legal entity. Only the ownership or shareholding structure will change. So the company will remain separate legal entity, but the control and ownership will change. Even when you have 100% acquisition of the target shares, still you have to go for a regulatory, legal, or tax implication requiring further restructuring through merger. So ultimately, when you acquire a company, even you acquiring 100%, because of the regulatory or legal or tax implication, ultimately it has to be converted into a merger. So it is possible that you can acquire a company 100%. It is also possible that you can have a majority, legal majority, which is 51%. It is also possible that you don't have a majority, you are a majority shareholder and you can still control with the de facto route, right? So these are some of the routes available. Now, next could be you are not trying to acquire the company. You are trying to acquire particular businesses or the assets. So you're not interested in Target's entire business. You are interested in the fraction or portion of Target's business or assets. So one form is asset buyouts, ABOs. So what is an asset buyout? So asset buyout itself, name itself is giving you the clear clarification. Acquisition of individuals' businesses or pieces of multi-business companies. So a company has so many businesses, and you are trying to take one of their businesses, not the entire company. For example, Abbott Labs acquisition of Piramal Healthcare Solution, a domestic formulation business for USD 3.72 billion. So Abbott did not actually acquire the entire Piramal. Piramal's only healthcare solution was acquired by them. Acquisition of assets or business along with specified liabilities or assets could be a option. The selling company retain the legal structure, oblique ownership with remaining businesses. So whenever you are buying an asset from the other companies, or you are buying a particular line of business of a company, the company retains its legal entity with the other businesses, because it is not selling you entirely. You are not taking over the entire company. You're just taking over the portion of the business. It's very common to acquire brands nowadays. So acquisition of brand is also very common. For example, Indian Rayon and Madura Garments, they had this deal where it was only the exchange of a brand. HLL Lakme is also a case where there was an acquisition of brand. Book Bond Kisan was also a case where there was only acquisition of brand. Most of them deals are either structured as an acquisition of business rather than pure brand. So instead of acquiring a brand, the way it is structured is that you are acquiring a business, but it is possible to acquire a brand. A number of pure brand transaction in pharma space is very common. For example, Piramal Healthcare's acquisition of iPill from Cipla at the cost of 950 million in March 2020. So in a pharma space, it's very important that you can buy a particular brand of drug and you get the right of production of it. So acquisition of an asset versus acquisition of a brand or a line of business, that is also very common. Now let's understand what is a statutory merger. So in Indian context, when the merger happens, it has some legal consequences. That is termed as a statutory merger. So first, in India, the operative term which is frequently used for a merger is amalgamation. So amalgamation means two companies are joining together. So instead of merger, the Indian operative term that we use is amalgamation. However, the meaning of both is same. It is always friendly. So mergers cannot be hostile. It is generally, and most of the cases, friendly, negotiated. Elsewhere, connotation of equals or near equals. So generally, it's basically the connotation where it is close to equal. Mainly for accounting reasons, pooling versus purchase method of the acquisition. So when you merge, the books of accounts has to be merged. So there are two methods. One is called pooling of the interest method and second is purchase method. We'll get into the valuation method at a later stage, but I'll just give you what is the difference. In the pooling method, both the entities balance sheet will be clubbed on the book value basis, and in the purchase method it is based on the fair value basis, which is not the book value, right? So just for now, let's just understand that under pooling method both the companies will merge at the book values, and at the purchase method both the companies will merge at the fair value. So we'll get into a detail when we get into the valuation module. In India, merger and amalgamation is different than the legal process pursued and legal and tax consequences of the companies involved, right? What could be the connotation? One, you have something called a company which is transferee, which is amalgamated, and one to the transferor, which is amalgamating company. So you have amalgamated and amalgamating. Now I'll ask you this with the help of an example. So let's say I'll take a very simple example. Company A is an acquirer, or maybe A is merging with B, right? But after merger, A is firm. The name of the new firm is A. So A and B are merging. You may look in the chat box for the question. A and B are merging, but since it's a merger, one of the entity will lose its identity. So that is B, company B. So after merger, company A survives, right? So the new company name is A. Now, can you tell me in this case, which is the amalgamating company and which is the amalgamated company? Which is the amalgamated company and which is the amalgamating company, right? B is actually losing its legal entity and it is part of A now. So think about it and answer. A is amalgamating and B is amalgamated. Yeah, that's correct. Because since A retains its separate legal entity and B loses. So B is said to be amalgamated. Exchange of shares or other conditions. Obviously, whenever there is a merger, you have to go for exchange of shares. What could be the ratio? What could be the consideration? No tax consequence either on the amalgamating company or the shareholders. So there is no tax consequences on company B. Share exchange ratio have to be identified via proper valuation, that for every company A's share, how many companies B share will be given. For example, B is amalgamating with A. B shareholder will now receive the shares of company A, but in what ratio? 2:1, 3:1, 1:1. That has to be decided by a proper valuation. There are some regulatory issues like Section 391 or 394 of Companies Act and court proceedings in case the statutory merger is going through.